Hey everyone, so hands up if you don't get gear lust for fast aperture lenses. Put your hand down, you're lying, we all do. Today we're going to talk about what's the fastest theoretical lens you could possibly make and how it's possible to go past an aperture of f1. Before we jump in, I just want to tell you about my new series. If you want to start making money from your photography, jump over to mattgranger.com/business to check out my new Business of Photography series. So look, a lot of us will have f1.8, f1.4 lenses and they're considered pretty fast. If you're really lucky, you might have something like an f1.2 lens, and then I'm sure we've all heard of, the legendary lenses like the f0.95s. There's even an f0.85 out there on the market. But what is the real limit? How fast could they go? You may have heard back in the day that Zeiss made a 50mm planar f0.7 for NASA, which then Stanley Kubrick, the film director, adapted to use on his 35mm cinema cameras to get some amazing images. But that's not where it stops. Back in the 60s and 70s, there was a huge race for who could make the fastest lenses. Now, there's a high ISO race, and before there was a high megapixel race. Back then it was the fastest lens race. And in 1966 Photokina, Zeiss brought to the show a 40mm Super Q Gigantor f0.33 lens. Here's an image of it. Something worth noting, it's a Frankenstein lens. It was cobbled together as a marketing exercise. It doesn't actually work, and the Q actually stands for Quatsch, I think it is, which apparently means nonsense in German. But there is a way that you can figure out what would be a theoretical F number. So first of all, let's take a look at the formula. Your F number equals your lens focal length over the diameter of your aperture. Now, important to keep in mind that aperture does not equal the front element of your lens. Taking a look at these three guys, the Canon 85 1.2, the Nikon 1.4, and then the Otus 1.4.
Looking top down on them, the front element size is different, and it's actually an inverse relationship of what you might expect. So first off, taking a look at the Nikon 1.4, that's got a front filter thread of 77. And then the Zeiss Otus has a front filter thread of 86, but it's still a 1.4. And finally, the Canon is a 1.2, but it's only 72, so actually the smallest.
The reason for that is it's actually the size of the opening of the aperture that counts, not what the size of the front element is. If you haven't seen it already, check out my video explaining the difference between f-stops and t-stops. Essentially, f-stops tells you how much light is theoretically coming through. T-stop measures what actually makes it out the back of the lens. So having a lens with a huge front element and better lenses, you're most likely to get the most light out, but your F number is what determines your depth of field. So using that theory, if we had a 50mm lens that had a 20cm aperture diameter, like this big, that would be 50/200 or an F number of f0.25. So absolutely crazy. Take it to the extreme, if you had a 35mm lens with a 35cm diameter of aperture, so 350mm, that would be 35/350, so an f0.1 aperture. Theoretically possible, but in terms of technical development and practical usage, completely useless. So looking at something like the f0.95 Noctilux, for example, still wide open, near its closest focusing distance, you have less than a millimeter of focus. So using that in any practical situation where you want something sharp is almost impossible. If you were going to something like an f0.33, the focal plane that you're going to have of sharp focus will be so minute, it will be impractical to use. And the other thing is, we're talking then about lenses that are huge and extremely heavy. Think about that 50mm f0.25 I just made out of thin air. A 20cm diameter of aperture means a lens of 25 or 30 centimeters at least. It is going to be a 10kg lens for a 50mm prime. Where are you possibly going to be able to use that? I can't imagine any street photographers using that one to blur out the background. So there's practicalities in terms of usage, but also design. When I spoke to Hubert Nasse from Zeiss, he was talking about, that the Otis is the best they can make for a mass 85mm lens. But yes, if there were no financial considerations and no practicality considerations, they could make one that produced even better image quality, but it would be significantly bigger and hugely more expensive. So there has to always be that balancing point. But I hope that explains for you why you can get an F number below F1. A lot of people think that F1 is as far as you can go, and that there is, theoretically at least, no limit to it. I hope that was of some interest to you. Leave me a comment below on what's the fastest lens you own, what's the situation you use it in, and is there a dream specification that you wish someone would come out with that you'd be interested in? Hopefully some lens companies are watching and I'll pay attention. Thanks. Do jump over to mattgranger.com/business. If you purchase before December 31, 2014, we've got a big prize pool up there for one person to win. Check it out. I'll see you soon.